Welcome to Lifestyle by SK, where wine, cigars, and relationships create that tapestry of extraordinary experienced people. So, on today's episode, I want to go into the part two of the topic for fathers needed stopping the single motherhood cycle. And I want to talk both to the men and women here and just provide some points that we need to look at together so that we can build much more of a nuclear family rather than a split family apart because of indifferences and all of a sudden babies start popping up. Now, when we look at the importance, as I go over the couple of points, looking at the importance of fathers in a child's life, I want to speak about it from a father's standpoint because what we see a lot of is we see more mothers raising the kids than we do see the fathers raising the kids. And we do have a small portion of fathers who do run the household in terms of them fathering the child and the mother is not present, but much more in the black community, you will see the mothers are normally oftentimes raising the kids alone. But when we look at this through the eyes of how important it is, just the presence of having the man around who is the father of your children, and it's going to be a little bit different for people who may have multiple baby daddies, but in reality, the father figure in the house, whether that be somebody who decides to step up and become a step baby daddy or the biological father, you have to also look at the emotional, the social, and the psychological benefits of just the presence of the father being there, being able to not only discipline the kids when things are going wrong, but to also create the balance in the household itself. Now we can go along the blame game and we can blame their single mothers or the cause of the fathers not being around, the fathers just disappeared out of life and all that. We can argue those are typical arguing points that people like to talk about. But are we really trying to get to the actual root of the problem to solve it so we can create more functional families in the black community so that our numbers can go up in terms of marriage and less in terms of divorce rates that happen if you all made it to that particular point. But countless times across social media, we've seen the statistics of fatherless homes and their impact on young men. But we need to ask ourselves, why is it a lot of fatherless homes? What fell out between the mother and the father? Why isn't the father there? And nobody seems to get the why the men are leaving in the first place. Everybody wants to cater to and start catering to the woman's side of why the man is not there, but not actually taking the time to actually talk to the men on why they even left in the first place. And so we are missing that. But when if we can be able to pull this back together, we can then begin to understand that how a father's guidance in the relationship can shape the masculinity of his sons. He can also discipline his sons. He can also provide accountability as well. And little girls need their fathers around too, because the mother is going to be nurturing on one hand, the father's going to be protecting on the other hand, and then putting that balance together to show them what a relationship is supposed to be like before they go out into public. That is what we're missing a lot. And you have now have kids who are blaming the absence of their father for their downfalls instead of the child when they grow up to become a teenager and get out of high school, them taking the initiative and responsibility to be an adult themselves and actually sit down and go and talk to their fathers. Kids, you have to stop listening to your mother and your family bad mouthing your father, and you need to actually sit down and talk with him if he's not there. You have to find a time to grow up as a functional adult, sit down, talk to your father, and figure out and ask him if you can learn why he left in the first place so that you don't repeat that same behavior when you start a family. And see, we have to break this particular cycle. But the generational impact of single motherhood is going to have its challenges as well. It's going to have its challenges that mothers face when raising kids alone because people are seeing that as a strong black woman and she doesn't need to be strong. That strong person needs to be that man being there in that relationship so that woman does not come anywhere close to any masculine state because it's impossible for that woman to become masculine. It's impossible for that man to become feminine. Everybody has to be in their respective roles in that relationship. The man's going to have to be masculine enough to know, hey, I need to be here for my kids. I need to make sure my household is not being shaded with any bad behavior. The woman is going to be there to provide the nurturing aspect and bringing her femininity out. That is what we are missing. We're missing this because now the kids are so much out of control. So that role, and I'm speaking to the majority of the time, what we're seeing is the fathers are not there for a specific reason. That is what we're not trying to figure out. We need to. But the absent father is, in perpetuating the generational cycles as it keeps happening over and over again because the little boy sees the father's not there. He goes out, gets some girl pregnant. They sleep around. Now he's got a baby, and now he leaves and goes on to the next person. And we can't keep repeating the same thing over and over again. We have to take some accountability. The men and the women have to take some accountability in the actions in which they are doing, which is causing the breakup of the homes in the first place. It's nobody else's fault. You can't blame the man for it. It's 100% both you and the dude that you're dealing with. It is you all's responsibility. Why do we keep going through this? But what we can look at is the positive side. Is how can look at this situation? How can we reconnect the fathers to prevent future cycles of absent parenting? Before you all start sleeping with folks, before you all start getting into any sexual acts, you have to first understand is could the person that you're dealing with, could you spend the rest of your life with them? Can you spend the rest of your life with them? Think about that before you start trying to have kids. But what I would definitely encourage young men to do, and young ladies as well, are going to have a good relationship with their mother. I don't see that being a big problem. The problem that I'm seeing is young men need to figure out how can they build a relationship with their father. They need to reconnect with their father. I'm encouraging more young men out there. If your father is not around, if your father is still alive, us somewhere, I don't care if the father's a crackhead to a father being in the C-suite, whatever. Find a way to reconnect with your father because when young men initiate that step, that's going to mend the strained relationships. Now, if the mother and father have some type of disagreement, they don't like each other, and we see this all the time with black folks, a lot of times the mothers don't want the kids or the sons interacting with their father because that father's going to also share their side of the story. But young men, you have to build a relationship with your dad to at least know why he even left in the first place so that you don't repeat that with your future family. I believe that a lot of mothers will feel a lot better if their sons were able to build a relationship back with their father because the issues that your parents had, young men, with each other, it's not your responsibility and it's not your fault. And it could hurt a lot of single black mothers that their sons are trying to build a relationship with their dad because they don't want them to find out the truth. But ladies, you have to make sure that they do know who their father is and they have to build those relationships because what you don't want is your son to flip around and not like you because he learned another side of the story. But we have to overcome these emotional barriers like resentment. Young men resenting their dad because their mom's mother said bad things about their dad. A lot of anger and hurt. And I know it is hard. But you have to know that just as your mother moved on, your father may have moved on. Your father may have remarried. And that is grown folks' business. But your step parent should not cut the relationship that you can have with your particular father. You can still have that. That is what you need to figure out what is actually going on. So build a relationship with your dad, because the role of fathers in stopping the cycle is fathers can also take accountability as well. Fathers, if you haven't heard from your son in years, kids in years, go. Go and try to take some accountability and actively try and re enter that child's life because they need you at this time. They need you so that way they can close that chapter and move on to a new one should you all decide to start a relationship with one another. But you can also have people who are stepdads out here who can mentor young men to build healthy relationships as well. We need that because the significance of leading by example, as we talk about it a lot, is showing what a stable family looks like. But I advocate for young men to have a phenomenal relationship with their dad, despite whatever indifference that their mother and father had, so they can actually talk and have a conversation. Because if you all are not trying to work with one another, you're gonna lose. You lose the opportunity of one day if you having a family, young men, and you have kids, and your kids don't even know who your dad is, or they don't have a relationship with your dad, not a relationship with their grandfather, and you're still breaking up houses. But then when we look at the community and the societal solutions, are there any mentorship programs for fatherless young men whose dads may have passed? Some type of club of respectable club where there are functional men in society who are doing great things, who are able to talk to the young men to give them some sort of guidance. Because we used to have that back in the day of just the neighborhood and the community. Now things are a little bit different because some people are just sick out here in the world. But even between the communities and the schools, can promote much more father involvement, doing more activities, doing more father and son trips. I've heard of fathers and their sons going, staying in remote locations for a week, having a really good, little father and son time trip. If you can't do that, going and just doing something just out of the blue with your son, whether that be playing ball in the park or building something together. We're missing that. But it shouldn't get to a point to where you have the government advocating policy change and support systems to strengthen families, because now you start getting to the child support system and stuff a lot like that. But I'm willing to bet if you start changing that child support system and making it to where if like the women are not getting paid as much as they think they should be getting paid, it will help a lot with these unwedded childbirths. Because it's like women are being incentivized to have the kids to keep the family apart so they can get paid, and then the kids still don't even know their fathers. Maybe, maybe some policy changes may help with that. But the easiest thing to do is for the families to actually start building with one another. But when we look at the bigger picture and we look at the vision for the future, we have to look at the long term benefits of breaking the single motherhood cycle. There are a list of possible solutions out there that we can use for this, but even just from different stories or examples that I provided, or ones that you've heard of father and son reconciliations, that can inspire hope. But we need more than just hope. We need fully functional, factual things that can be put in place to help close this gap that we have. We have to figure this out. We can't keep blaming the system. We cannot keep blaming everybody else but ourselves. But what I want to see is more fathers and young men stepping up for their families. This is what we need right now. We need to increase the marriage rate in our community. Once we increase the marriage rate and people are beginning to be happily married, then the kids can start coming into the picture. Our problem is we're having kids before we are getting into marriages, which is already causing a breakup in the family in the first place. We are doing this out of cycle and out of turn. But we cannot keep having the same talking points. It's 2025. It's 2025, y'all, and we are going more backwards than we are going forward in terms of fully functional families. So, like, listen, subscribe to the channel. Definitely comment below. Lifestyle by SK with wine, cigars, and relationships. Create that tapestry of extraordinary experience. Comment below so we can go ahead and get this topic started because I really want to get into the nitty gritty of it so that way we can create fully functional nuclear families. Like, listen, subscribe.